The main key to defeating Stanford this coming Saturday is going to be slowing down Ashton Daniels, both on the ground and in the air.
You are Locked On Clemson, your daily podcast on the Clemson Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Clemson podcast. I am your host, John Bivens. You can follow us over on Twitter at I am John Bivens, as well as at LO_Clemson. We are a credentialed media member for Clemson. Thanks for making Locked On Clemson your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and over on YouTube. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Here on the Locked On Clemson podcast, you're getting three things. You're getting all sports, all passion, all of the time, where we're bringing you everything you need to know regarding Clemson sports. Today is Wednesday evening on September 25th. Happy birthday to my brother Luke. Today we got a great show for you. Going to be talking about slowing down at Ashton Daniels, talking about a need for Phil Mafa to have a big game, and then walking through the ACC basketball schedule. We talked about doing it yesterday. We're going to do it today. We are grateful for all of our sponsors. For a full list of our sponsors, make sure you check out the episode notes below. The first key to defeating Stanford is going to be we have to slow down Ashton Daniels, both on the ground and in the air. Before we get into that, I want to clarify something. Yesterday's episode, a big theme, was talking about our defense. And looking at comments, hearing some of y'all reach out to us, we feel like a lot of y'all thought that we were saying our defense is in a mode where we should freak out. And we specifically said, I like, you can go and listen to the episode. I said our defense is not bad. I'm not panicking. I'm not freaking out. I'm just stating that there's areas for improvement. We said that yesterday. Still, some of y'all decided not to hear, decided to think, oh, this guy's freaking out because we let this happen, even though they only scored 7 points and a half. Ugh. Please listen. Look, yesterday's episode was this. It was to point out that when a freshman quarterback looks as good as CJ Bailey did, stat-wise, forget points, because sometimes we all know as Clemson fans, you can have a great performance, and sometimes the points just don't come your way. Stat-wise, CJ Bailey looked really good. Too good for a first-time start at Death Valley against this Clemson defense. That's what we were saying, is that his performance, even though the defense looked great, I'm not freaking out. I'm not worried about it. They obviously have some offseason rust still on them in week 3, technically week 4, game 3. That might be a cause for a little bit of concern. And so today, the biggest key is we're diving into the content, talking about Stanford as we play them this week. Our biggest key when it comes to Stanford is this. We've got to find a way to slow down Ashton Daniels. When you look at Stanford's team, when you look at overall their team, their top passing yards receiver or passing yards is obviously from their quarterback, Ashton Daniels. But not only that, their top rushing yards is also from their quarterback, Ashton Daniels. So far this season, Daniels has 59 for its 96 completions. That's an average of 61.5 completion percentage. He's thrown for 502 yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He has a 118 rating so far, has been sacked 6 times, his longest pass for 41 yards. Their top rushing receiver is also Ashton Daniels. He has 39 carries for 163 yards, 0 rushing touchdowns, but he has busted one out for 31 yards. Their next highest one, they have one that's received 4 that has 21 carries, only 61 yards, also no touchdowns. And then C. Davis Jr. has 15 carries for 132 yards, 0 touchdowns as well. Their only rushing touchdowns came from their backup quarterback, Lamson, who has 10 carries, 16 yards, for 2 touchdowns. If we want to beat Stanford, we've got to start with limiting Ashton Daniels. We all know a dual threat quarterback can be tough. We know that from experience because we've had them. We've had them with Deshaun Watson, with Kelly Bryant, even Trevor Lawrence, DJU, Cade Klubnik. They're not dual threats, stereotypical dual threat quarterbacks, but they have the ability to rush. They have the ability when that Clemson and now when Cade's at Clemson now, they have the ability to run it. We just saw that last week with a 55-yard untouched touchdown run by Cade Klubnik. When you have a dual threat quarterback, it completely changes up what they're able to do, completely changes up how you have to guard them. Because now you have to start thinking, well, if not only is he getting the most yards, he has 30 more yards than the second highest rushing receiver. He also has almost double as many carries as the second highest carries. So he's their number one threat on the ground. And obviously he's throwing the ball. He's their number one quarterback. That's why he's throwing the ball so much. When that's the case, you've got to have this dual kind of style of guarding him. You've got to have some man. You've got to put a QB spy on him, where one guy's job is only to be watching him. If he takes off, that's his job to stop him. You've got to be running up different systems on the defensive line where you're truly setting the edge, but you can't leave the middle wide open so he can run up the middle. You've got to be you've got to be really particular on how you set this up. Wes Goodwin, I'm not worried about. I think he's going to set this up really well. But in order for us to beat them, we really have to slow down Ashton Daniels. When you look at so far this season, Stanford right now is sitting at 1-2. They are 1-0. They won their first ever ACC game against Syracuse at Syracuse, 26-24 this past Saturday. But when you go through their games, they opened up the season against TCU. They lost that one 34-27. Ashton Daniels had a decent game in that game. He had 17 carries for 87 yards, went 17 for 35 throwing the ball, 163 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Had a decent game there. They lost that in the game. They went through, it was kind of a close game overall. Stanford was up 17-10 at halftime. TCU came back, tied it up 17-17 into the third, and then TCU just scored 2 touchdowns where Stanford had to settle for a field goal once. So that final score, 34-27. Close game. Ashton Daniels did well, but they kind of slowed him down. They didn't allow him to get 100 yards. He kept him under 200 yards passing, kind of slowed him down. The next game against Cal Poly, Ashton Daniels had a decent game. They won that one 41-7, as they should beat Cal Poly. Ashton Daniels went 19 for 23, 221 yards with 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. They pulled him. Elijah Brown, the second string quarterback, came in with 7 for 7 for 97 yards, 1 touchdown. On the ground, Cal Poly, honestly, they limited Ashton Daniels to the ground, only allowed him 9 carries for 31 yards. But when he's throwing the ball all over you, kind of understandable. He's throwing you. He doesn't need to run. So not a lot of ground game there. And then this past game against Syracuse, in my opinion, their biggest win so far, obviously, the other one was Cal Poly. That's it. Ashton Daniels had a good game this one. He had a couple turnovers. And that's one thing we're seeing with him. His turnover bug is real. He has 3 turnovers, only 4 touchdowns on the season. This past game against Syracuse, he went 23 for 38, so he threw the ball a lot, had 178 yards, 1 touchdown to 2 interceptions. And rushing the ball, again, he had a lot of carries, had the most carries in the game with 13 from either side, had 47 yards on the ground. The Chris Davis Jr. did have one more or a little bit more yards than he did, but he went 13 carries, 45 yards. His longest one was 14. So overall, he seems like a guy, he's going to get carries. He's going to throw the ball a lot. And so with those 2 aspects, we've got to make sure we limit the yards. We can't allow any big break runs. We can't allow him to drift out of the pocket untouched. We can't have any of that happening. But we also know he has an arm. He can throw it. So we need to make sure we limit it, force him to have those turnovers. He has shown examples where he can turn the ball over. Twice against Syracuse, another one early on in the year. He's going to turn the ball over. That's something he does. So if we can force turnovers and limit his rushing, limit his legs, but also at the same time, limit how much damage he can do in the air. If we can truly make him choose one dimension, make him be only a runner, make him be only passing, eliminate one whole aspect of his game, that allows us to focus in on him completely at one level. And I know me saying that seems very simple, right? Oh, just don't let him run. Obviously, it's more than that. I'm glad Wes Goodwin has gone to place, not myself. But the biggest key for Clemson to beat Stanford this weekend has got to be we got to slow down Ashton Daniels. That's got to be key 1. But there is a second key, and the second key involves one of our players that really we were really counting on this week to have a big game on the offensive side. Hey, Clemson fans, have you heard about Roy? It stands on Return on You, and it's a new platform that lets you, the fans, get involved in NIL like never before by making contributions directly to your favorite athletes. By supporting players directly, you can help shape rosters, retain talent, and keep your favorite players out of the transfer portal. As you know, NIL has changed the game for college athletes, and Roy changes the NIL game for fans. You get exclusive content access. When fans contribute contribute to a successful campaign, they receive access to exclusive content from the athlete, such as their announcement decisions, behind-the-scenes footage, and other personal reflections, all of which are only available to the fans who support that athlete. You also get no risk. Fans' contributions are securely held and only distributed if the athlete makes the decision that aligns with the fan's support. If not, the money is returned right back to you. Download Roy for the iOS or Android and enter code Locked On, and you will automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to earn $5,000 cash. Get the Roy app right now. Visit roy.com for additional details. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. Get off the sidelines and get into the NIL game with Roy. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. At my last job, when I left, I was able to help the company that I was leaving, find the next person for the role. And part of that was LinkedIn Jobs. And LinkedIn Jobs made it so simple that we could just relax back and allow LinkedIn Jobs to be a great resource for us to find the next hire. LinkedIn Jobs isn't just a job board. It helps us find professionals that you can't find anywhere else. Even those who aren't actively searching for a new job might be open to the perfect role. And in a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong spots. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free today. Terms and conditions apply. The second key to defeating Stanford is going to be we got to get Phil Mafa going very early on. One way to really determine what the team is to look at the ACC's team stats so far. ESPN does a great job of putting out where the team stats are averaging so far this year as far as offense, defense, special teams, all that. For instance, when you look at Clemson and Stanford so far on the special teams front, neither of them have allowed a touchdown. They're punting. They're averaging pretty well as far as punt returns. Looking there, nobody has had a punt return for either team there either. But then when you look at the offense, so far yards per game, Clemson has the fourth most yards per game in the ACC at 474 yards per game. Stanford is the second lowest with 358. Fun fact, the lowest in the ACC right now is FSU, the only one averaging less than 300 yards per game. Love to see it. Love to see it, right? When you look at passing yards per game, Clemson is in fifth with 285. Stanford is fifth from last with 220. Rush yards per game, Clemson is a little bit lower on, maybe than we're used to. They're in eighth, 189 per game. Stanford, again, is fifth from the bottom with 137 yards per game. And then lastly, points per game. Clemson's in fourth right now in the ACC, averaging almost 43 points a game. Stanford is in the middle of the pack, averaging 31. The defense is where this gets interesting. I think our defense is the defensive stats, seeing where Stanford is, really outlines what Clemson needs to do on the offensive front to be able to show and utilize and take advantage of that Stanford defense. So when you look at overall yards per game, Clemson is averaging the third most yards allowed per game. Granted, our starting defense has only played the last two games in the first half. So not going to put too much stock into this at this point, but we've allowed 415 yards per game so far. Stanford is the seventh most at 350. Passing yards per game. Stanford allows the most passing yards in the ACC per game at just under 300. Clemson is the fourth most at 249. Rushing yards. So Stanford allows the most rushing yards per game, or most passing yards, but they also allow the least amount of rushing yards per game. So they allow almost 300 passing yards per game. They average just over allowing 50 rush yards per game. They've only allowed 51.7 rush yards per game so far this season. Clemson is averaging 165 rush yards, the fifth most in the ACC. And then finally, points per game. Clemson's allowing the most points per game. Again, I'm not holding much stock in that. We played the number one offense in the country, and then we had our backups playing the past two games. So I'm not holding stock in that. Stanford, though, is averaging 21 points allowed per game. Clemson's averaging much more than that per game right now. So here's all that means. Here's why we're breaking into that. Stanford is allowing the most pass yards per game during the season so far in the ACC. Cade Klubnik is going to be able to make passes. He's going to be able to find receivers. He's going to have open lanes, and he should be set up to have another really big game passing the ball. Stanford is known for so far this season for not allowing a lot of rush yards. They have a good front. They have a good defensive line up front. If we can get Phil Mafa going, if we can get past that 50-yard mark early on, like I'm talking, if we can get 75, 100 yards in the first half, that would be massive for this. Because now what that would do, it would make them have to take some of that pass defense that's already weak and highlight even more the rush defense, which would open up the field even more. This is a prime week for Clemson to truly utilize the dirt raid. The dirt raid is something we've talked about a bunch, right? We've talked about this so much. The dirt raid is this mindset that Garrett Riley came in right as he was hired, and Garrett Riley and Dabo Swinney kind of coined this dirt raid where you run the ball, which allows you to throw it all over them, right? Successful rushing produces better passing, right? That's the mindset of the dirt raid. This week is the prime time example and opportunity for Garrett Riley to have the dirt raid. If we can force a good rushing defense from Stanford to have to push even more focus on the rush defense, it'll even more take advantage and highlight a weak pass defense that Stanford has. The key for our offense to beat the Stanford defense is have a successful rushing game from the beginning. Have Phil Mafa go off, utilize Cade Klubnik's legs a little bit, let Jay Haynes hop in there, utilize our rushing game early up front, and cause their defense to shift from a very weak passing game. You got to think, Clemson has showed when Cade Klubnik's throwing the ball so far, he's throwing the ball well. We're excluding Georgia game. Forget about Georgia game. But he's throwing the ball really well. If he's doing that, and they have a weak passing defense, they're already going to be trying to focus on how they can prevent that. They're going to be looking at zone coverages, man coverage, you kind of getting creative schemes going on to try to slow down Cade. If we can break through their tough rush defense early on, it's going to cause them to rethink, okay, maybe we can't put so much attention to this pass defense. We've got to go back to stopping the rush, which will then allow us to really take advantage of that poor pass offense that they have. Or pass defense they have. That's the biggest key for our offense this game. Rush the ball often, rush the ball early, have success on the ground, and utilize that dirt raid. Let that dirt raid that Clemson has pushed for 2 years now, let that lead us so our passing game can end the game with explosive plays. But make them stack the box so we can throw it right over them on an already weak secondary that they have. They don't have a strong secondary. That's why they're allowing almost 300 pass yards per game. This is an opportunity. Garrett Riley, if you're going to really let the dirt raid thrive for Clemson this year, prove it with this game against Stanford, because this is the prime opportunity for that. Tomorrow, on Thursday, as we break through and talk about this even more, we're going to talk more about this Stanford team, some key players that we need to focus on outside of Ashton Daniels, talk about some other stuff. But for now, let's kind of switch subjects. Let's switch mindsets a little bit. The ACC basketball schedule has been released, and Clemson is in for a really tough
Jarvis Davis here for FanDuel. You heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So guess what? I'm about to tell you a little bit more. We got a little something just for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. It doesn't matter if you're a fan of the Atlanta Falcons, the Carolina Panthers, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Las Vegas Raiders. It doesn't matter, because guess what? With a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. Yes, every regular season out-of-market game. That is so dope. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. And make sure you download America's #1 sportsbook.
Clemson's basketball schedule is officially set. And let me tell you, we have a tough February coming towards us. if y'all don't know, college basketball is something that is exciting. It is one, in my opinion, I think is underrated with football. So many people focus on college football, and college football is amazing. It's definitely spot number one. We are mainly a football podcast just because we're following Clemson. But there's been this mindset where Clemson is an all football school. Brad Brownell is doing everything he can to prevent that mindset, to kind of shift that up where basketball is just as much up there. You also have Eric Bakich over with baseball, pushing it there. You have our reigning soccer champions. Clemson isn't just a football school. We are an athletic school, and our basketball team is doing their best to continue to be a program that is competitive year in and year out. We are 1 month and 5 days away from our kickoff, jump ball off for the first time for our first game in basketball. I am pumped. I can't wait to get down to Little John Coliseum and get back on Media Row, get back in the press conferences down there, being able to enjoy the basketball games and get back into another season covering them. I will go ahead and preface it this. Last year, we were at almost every game when it came down to working media for the basketball games. This year is going to be a little bit more challenging. My wife and I are expecting our first child in early November, which we're excited about. We can't wait for that. But with that being said, obviously there's going to be a little period of time where I can't go down to Death Valley. I can't go down to Little John. I'll be watching online, but we still will be bringing you episodes, all that kind of stuff. Just want to give you a little heads up. We won't be doing as much media coverage, especially in the beginning of the season, with this being the case for with the season, with our expecting a little girl. But either way, the schedule is set. We're 1 month and 5 days away, and the schedule is set. So we just want to go through, and we want to talk about some big marquee games because Clemson's got a tough schedule, especially in the beginning of February. But let's go right through. So we open up the season with an exhibition game against Augusta, October 30th. That excited about that. It kicks off on a Wednesday at 7 p.m. Some other non-conference games. We played Boise State again this year. We played them last year. This year is going to be at Boise State in Idaho. So that game is on Sunday, November 17th. That'll be a good game. Excited about that. Our biggest non-conference game is the ACC-SEC Challenge. This year, we get to host the University of Kentucky. I am pumped. We will be at that game. I have already cleared it with my wife. I will be at this game. It is a 9:30 late game on Tuesday, December 3rd. I cannot wait for that one. It's going to be electric. It's going to be exciting. That's going to be a game where Clemson is really going to be able to put the test. They're really going to come out and show, are they this Elite Eight team from this last year's run? What are the holes? What are the levels? Who's our main scorers? It'll give us so much information and much more on that game. So that's a big game early on in December. And the next game after that, we don't have an easy game, as then we leave that game, and 4 days later, we travel to Miami to play Miami at kickoff ACC on December 7th. That's going to be a tough game. That's going to be one where it's like, okay, what's the case here? What's going on here? Excited about that one. We also play Memphis again. We played them last year. Didn't go how we wanted it to, but we play them again. Play South Carolina, which is a good one. And then we get to then it really gets diving into a fully ACC schedule. We play Stanford and Cal early on, both of them at Clemson. Don't have to travel out there yet. We do have to travel a little bit farther than we ever have. We do have to go to SMU late in February 22nd. We'll be traveling to Dallas. But the stretch that I really want to talk about is this. So February 1st on Saturday, we go to Raleigh, and we play the Final Four team, NC State. That is a team that obviously came off March Madness. They were definitely the Cinderella story last year. Weren't going to make it in the tournament, won the ACC, then went on an elite run, went on a great run to make it to the Final Four. They played excellent, played an amazing season last year. Obviously, they lost some people, lost DJ Burns, lost a couple other talented people, but we travel to them on February 1st. That kicks off a hard 4-game stretch. I mean, a hard 4-game stretch. And honestly, it could be a hard 5-game, depending on what team. But then after that, we come back home and we face Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, it should be a game that we win, but we did lose to them last year in double overtime at home. I'm still hurting. I'm still a little bitter about this one. That one upset me a good bit, but we got to beat them. And then after that game, we post Duke University. Duke is going to be, I'm going ahead and call it now. They are my prediction to be the champions this coming year. They've got so much talent. You could take away their top 2 best players, and they still would want to be a top 3 program in the ACC. That's how good they are. Cooper Flagg is going to be amazing this year. I mean, he played well. If you haven't heard about Cooper Flagg, number 1 recruit in the nation, signed with Duke Blue Devils. He's a true freshman this year. He will be starting. He went and practiced. He was on the practice squad that the United States Olympic team played against. And he made them look like there was a couple plays he made them look silly. Played good on defense, scored on them. I think he dropped double digits. He might have dropped 20 points against the Olympic team. He played well. He's a player that is already set for the NBA. If he was allowed to skip college, I guarantee he would. And he'd probably be the number 1 pick right now, much less after a year of college basketball under his belt. So that'll be a tough game in Little John. We do get to host them on Saturday, February 8th. That'll be a great game to watch. And then the game after that, we host Carolina, UNC Tar Heels. We host them 2 days later on Monday, February 10th at 7 p.m. So that's a 4-game stretch at NC State, home against Georgia Tech, home against Duke, home against Carolina. The good news is we're home for 3 out of 4 of those. The bad news is we have 2 days in a row where it goes Duke, day off, Carolina. That is tough. That is a rough spot to be beginning February as you're getting close to the end of the season. You're getting down to the nitty-gritty part of the year. Your team should already be set. And honestly, last year in that time, that was right around the breakdown that Clemson happened. They had a little bit of rust stretch and a little bit in that time period last year. So that's a tough time period. I'm already circling that to be a hard part of the calendar. Hopefully, Brad can get his team ready. Hopefully, we can pull. If we can walk out of those 4 games 3-4, I'll love it. I'll be living on it. That'd be amazing. Walk out 2-2. You're a little discouraged. If we lose to NC State or Georgia Tech, I think we're hurting in that. But then we end that rough 4-game stretch with a back-to-back road game. We play Saturday, February 15th at Florida State, which is a team that they could either be bottom of the ACC or could be pushing for the top of the ACC. They float so much. And then we go to SMU. The rest of the season, it looks very similar. We end the season on Saturday, March 8th against Virginia Tech. And that's our schedule. Obviously, we skipped around a little bit. We didn't go through every game. You can find the schedule. It is out everywhere. Literally just search Clemson basketball schedule, and it'll be the first result. We got a tough schedule. Got a tough February. We're going to dive in. Like we said, we're a month and 5 days away. Throughout this time, we're going to be mixing in some basketball with our football, talking about different aspects of the basketball, talking about our roster breakdown, what our expectations are for the season, all that and so much more. Can't wait to dive into all of that. It's going to be exciting, going to be fun. Can't wait for it. We're also in the middle of football season. It's about to enter the time of one of the best times to be a college sports fan when you're right in the middle of football season and basketball's kicking off. Can't wait. Going to be exciting. But with all that being said, that is going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Clemson podcast. Thanks so much for giving us a listen. Thanks for letting us be your first listen every single day. Now for your second listen, go listen to Locked On College Football Podcast. From NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McCaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to that podcast in our episode notes below, so you don't need to search. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Like we said, tomorrow and Friday, we're going to talk more about this Stanford game on Saturday and what we can expect from that. Make sure you join our Locked On Insider program, our Locked On Clemson Insider program, by texting Clemson to 864-252-1907. If you haven't, make sure you're subscribed, whether it's on audio or video on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 1,500 subscribers right now. Help us out with that. Share it with a friend. A biggest way that you could help us is if you could leave us a written review, whether on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Leave us a review. That would be so much for us. That would be such a big help. You can't really review on YouTube. Leave us a like and subscribe. But audio platforms, leave us a written review. That would be so much. A 5-star review and a little comment about what you enjoy about the show would go so far. But with that being said, we're glad that you joined it. We're so grateful for our everydayers and for all of you listening today. We can't wait for tomorrow's episode. Until then, keep that Tiger pride alive and roaring. And as always, go Tigers.